Hey everybody. Welcome to Learning Golang from Zero. I'm Paul Kernfeld, a member of the technical staff at Cockroach Labs, and today I'm going to be learning about dependency injection in Golang. Thanks. I'm glad that everybody's loving the countdown clock. It does have I didn't know about the little explosion when the countdown finishes, but it's looking pretty fun. Oh yeah, and welcome to a mustache edition of Learning Golang from Zero. A very special. I shaved my beard because I have to go to a public place, and the beard is bad for the COVID mask seal. So yeah, keeping the facial hair a little contained here. Yeah, sorry about the stream title. It looks like I'm not sure why that's not correct. I'm going to have to fix that up. But yeah, so to last week on Learning Golang from Zero, we were doing some maps, and that's still something that I want to finish up before we move on to dependency injection, but I think it's going to be pretty quick. And then yeah, in terms of what I've been up to outside of learning Golang, earlier this week, I was using a bad camera strap and I accidentally dropped my camera right onto the sidewalk. It was a very stressful moment, 100% my own dumb fault for doing so. Fortunately for me, it landed right on the lens, so it busted the lens, but unlike a lot of other people, I have actually a pretty cheap lens. My lens is only 1/10 of the price of the camera. So I was able to get a new lens. And seemingly, as you can probably see, the camera seems to be still working, but that was a very dumb thing. Oh yeah, Soviet glass. I don't know if you guys know about this, but there's these camera lenses that were manufactured in the Soviet era, in the Soviet Union, and they produce some pretty interesting visual effects. So it's definitely something I was thinking about looking into. To perhaps it would give my stream an interesting visual look to it. But yeah, I think that historical camera lenses, that could be the new collectible item, because people are all into photography now, and how do you make something that's I don't know, interesting and collectible? I think having a limited run historical item is a great way to take your photography to the next level in a way that's it's exclusive. So yeah, I might try and get some Soviet lenses. They're actually not that expensive. I think they're $50, which is really cheap for a camera lens. All right, so Golang. Last time we were working on this map, and we were learning about the Golang map, and let's take a look first at our map.go file as a refresher. We've got, so the name of our type is dictionary, and it's really just a map with string keys and string values under the hood. I guess this is another case where we have generics in Golang, right? Because the map type is actually generic over the key and value type. So we've got an add function. This is pretty simple. And then we have a search function that actually will return an error if we don't find the word that you're looking for. So now we want to add an update function. So first, I'm going to start by just copying the test. Am I saying that I want to expense Soviet glass? Oh, there's no question that collectible camera lenses are definitely a work-related expense. I don't know. We have a photography channel at work, and one of the guys, Nick, has this He has like a recreation of like it's like an 1880s camera lens, I believe. And it's actually it's like brass colored. It looks like you're carrying like something out of like a Victorian like steampunk novel. And it's only like a couple $1,000. So I think it's pretty reasonable. So test update. Let's take a look at what this test is doing. We're declaring a new word. We're giving it a definition, creating a new dictionary. Oh, this is interesting. I didn't realize we can, because dictionary is a type alias of a string to string map, we can actually create a new dictionary with this syntax. Okay, we've got a new definition and we're calling the update function. And then we're checking the definition. Everything was better in the 1880s. Yeah. When you're talking about 80s nostalgia, I'm always talking about 1880s nostalgia personally. So we're calling this thing assert definition. I feel like I don't have an assert definition function, so I'm going to have to go grab that. I don't really feel like writing that. I'm just going to search for this. I don't, okay, yeah, they gave us assert definition over here. So I guess I'll put this next to assert strings because they're both assertion functions. So what we want to see now, we want to see that the test will fail because we haven't defined an update method. So RC10 says generics are just 3 void pointers in a trench coat anyways. What's that emote? I should learn more about. Oh no, I can't mouse over the Twitch emotes to see what they're actually called. Kappa. Yeah, I don't know enough Twitch culture. So update is undefined. That's great. That's the error message that we were hoping for. So let's take a look. Let me look at the signature of this. I think it's pretty simple. It's just dictionary.update and then a word and a new definition. So I think we can just try and write that and see how it goes. There's an interesting question about what we should do if the word isn't in the dictionary. Do we want to actually insert it if it's not there, like an upsert? What is the meaning of the kappa emote? So I'm just gonna try some. I'm just gonna try the most simple syntax here, and I feel like that's gonna work. That's interesting because the update and the add function actually right now have exactly the same logic. We might want to change that. For example, you could have add return an error if the key is already present or something like that. For anybody who's tuning in, curious what programming languages you're currently familiar with and what's your level of experience with Golang? This is my 7th episode of this series, but I've also been learning some Golang at work. And I wouldn't say I've been learning it systematically at work, but kind of just picking up stuff as it's useful to me. And what I've been working on is mostly just working to add new regions to the Cockroach Cloud free tier offering. So we've got, oh, I got to go back down to the update section here because I scrolled up. Okay, test update here. So let's see if we can, let's see if our test passes. Bill Sayum says, I use Python and Java. It's my first time looking at Go. I'm curious to hear whether you find Go intuitive to look at based on Python and Java. I would hope that it does look pretty intuitive. I think a lot of the syntax to me actually really looks reminiscent of Python. So test update. Okay, the test is passing. Great. So let's do a git commit. And I'm going to copy these new tests I have. What they're doing here is that they seem to want to say that if the word is already in the dictionary, we want to throw an error. I feel like we kind of already did this. I might just skip this. Is anybody interested to actually see this update implementation, or should I just kind of move on? In the last episode, we basically did the same thing, and I think this is just kind of refactoring. Oh, okay, this is interesting. So we're declaring a few new constants. This is good. At the same time, I don't think it's that interesting to talk about because I think people probably already get how to do constants. Paul, who's my tea sponsor for today's episode? Today's episode is based on I just had a little Nespresso actually. I've turned my back on tea. I had I actually forget which one it is, but Nespresso has a pretty good line. I don't even remember. They're like, I don't know, Italian inspired espresso capsules. They're pretty good. I think it's called Nespresso Ispirazione series. And they have like Ispirazione Rome, Ispirazione Venice. They have different like inspiration series for different like Italian regions. So it's like an espresso capsule that like emulates a Roman espresso. Thoughts on pu'er tea? I love pu'er tea. Pu'er is, I want to say it's a smoky tea, right? Am I thinking of Lapsang Souchong? Pu'er, is it large data bank? Is pu'er smoked? I feel like, I know that I like pu'er. No beard and no tea. Full rebrand. Yeah, I got to work on my consistency here. Oh, pu'er is fermented. That's right. But I think all tea is fermented in some way, or at least like enzymatically fermented. We should get my coworker Sam Tilney to teach us about tea types. Yeah, I don't even remember what pu'er tea is. Sad. So we've got this triple case. We've got a case statement here. What do they want us to do? They want us to like search for if the word is in the dictionary. Then based on this, we're going to return different values. Sure, this is fine. So if we don't find it, we want to return that it doesn't exist. If we do find it, we're going to set it. And then if there's some other kind of error, I don't even know what would be, like, what could this even return? I would be surprised if this can do anything. Is it possible that searching a dictionary could return another kind of error? Maybe if the word is like too long or something. It seems a little strange. One thing that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at this actually is this code is definitely not going to be thread safe. So as an example, you could do this search in two different threads, and then the search can complete at the same time or at close times to each other in the separate threads, and then you might end up in the wrong state here because we're not searching and setting atomically. That said, I actually don't know if the Golang map is thread safe anyways. In most languages, the default map is not thread safe. So you need some, like maybe a library or something if you want to use it from multiple threads. Because even an operation like this, it looks like it's doing one thing, but it's possible that under the hood, there's actually multiple different operations going on. Maybe it needs to resize the map or something. So I think there's an interesting case here where the Golang, where we haven't really thought about threads for this code, which is fine because this is just an intro book, but I'm curious about it. Does anybody know if the Go map is thread safe? How safe are Golang maps for concurrent read-write operations? That's an interesting phrase that they say. Dana, maps aren't thread safe by default. Thank you. So maps are not safe for concurrent use. It's not defined what happens when you read and write to them simultaneously. Okay, and they're saying you need to use a synchronization mechanism. So I guess when they say this, it's not defined what happens when you read and write to them simultaneously. I would think that you should be able to read from the map as much as, like, let's say that you're saying that you don't do any writes. It should be fine to read from the map as much as you want without encountering concurrency bugs. I think that seems like it should be true in most languages, but are there like weird gotchas that could happen if you're reading from a map from multiple threads? It seems like it should be okay. Source E10 says, just check if it implements sync. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. So Mesh saying, I had to use locks while working with routines. I'm definitely looking forward to learning about locks in Golang and other kind of like concurrency control stuff. I think that stuff is really fun. Ooh, here's an interesting like clarification. Before Golang 1.6, concurrent read is okay, concurrent write is not okay, but write and concurrent read is okay. That is interesting. I would expect that writing and reading would be a problem, but they're saying since Golang 1.6, map cannot be read when it's being written. So after Golang 1.6, concurrent access map should be like, ooh, and they give us an example. That's awesome. So they're making this new sync.rw mutex. Ooh, I do not know what this for loop is. This is just an infinite loop, right? Source C10 says it should be possible to do this reading, but for most undefined behavior, you can technically predict what it does, but shouldn't rely on it. Right, because they could make some kind of optimization where somehow like reading from the map could actually cause a write to happen under the hood. I know that that's something that does happen with CockroachDB. Obviously, CockroachDB is a lot more complicated than a Golang in-memory map. But I think in CockroachDB, if you're just reading from the database, that might cause, statistics and other actual modifications under the hood. So, for example, if you only have read access to the file system, I think that with CockroachDB, you might not even be able to successfully read from the database. Maybe somebody in the chat knows more about that than I do. But I thought that was a kind of interesting and weird case. It kind of matters if you're like, maybe if you're like about to run out of disk space or something. where you need to figure out a way to read from CockroachDB without actually trying to consume more disk space, which sounds like a really cool problem. So this says, you can get this, you can get an error. How thread safe is the Go GC, by the way? It seems like a pretty bad performance loss to do all tracking atomically. That is a good question. Why would that be? Why would that be? Oh, I see what you're saying. Are atomics really that bad with performance? I thought that they were like pretty fast on a lot of systems. But I believe the Golang GC was designed from the ground up to work well on multi-threaded systems, but I'm not positive about that. All right, back to this thing. So I guess we're kind of just skipping. I think we're just going to skip the rest of the map stuff. I don't think there's too much that's really new here. I mean, we can make the delete function, but it doesn't look that different than what we've already been working on. So I think I'm ready to move on to dependency injection. Let's see what we have to learn about here. So this guide is showing you don't need a framework. It doesn't overcomplicate your design. It facilitates testing, and it allows you to write great general purpose functions. That sounds awesome. I love that. I think when I think of dependency injection, I do think of using some kind of framework like Juice in Java. So we're going to test printing like in a hello world. So we've got this function greet, which will take in a name and it will call printf. So this printf will do a formatted print to standard out, and we want to test that out. We could try and we could actually make multiple processes, or even just figure out some way to hook standard out into some like destination that we can capture from and then test. But I'm guessing we're going to do something a little easier. So we want to inject the dependency of printing. Cool. And we're going to use an interface here. I forget if we've already covered interfaces. I think we did cover interfaces when we talked about structs. And I would say, as I've been thinking about it, interfaces and Go's like object-oriented features are so far maybe my favorite part of Go, because they seem really, really simple. And it seems like there's not really that many foot guns with object-oriented programming in Go. Sora C10 says the name dependency injection sounds like a type of vulnerability to me. Sad robot. Yeah, it sounds like SQL injection, right? But I think it's completely different. So our function doesn't, when I think of it, dependency injection, I think of like crazy like Java enterprise programming where you have like config manager, factory or whatever, like where you have just like way too many levels of abstraction. Okay. If you look at the source code of format.printf, you can see a way for us to hook in. So printf from the Go format library is actually calling this function fprintf, which I don't know what the F really stands for, but the difference here is that it actually takes standard out as an argument. So this is kind of suggesting we can take another standard. os.standardout is a type io.writer, I believe. So we can take another io.writer. The reason that I know this is I was actually working on some testing stuff, and I was pretty much doing this exact same thing, where I would just test it by writing out into a buffer in memory. So I think this chapter will be pretty easy for me. Hopefully. So what is an os.standardout? I think it's going to be an io.writer. And they're solving this by actually looking at the source code. One thing about Golang that I really like is the source code is extremely readable for the standard library, and it's easy to get to. GitHub.com Hello World Enterprise Edition. Oh, we definitely got to check out Hello World Enterprise Edition in Java. Do we have any Java programmers in the comments? Oh, do we have? Yeah, so source com example. Let's see. Okay, this should be pretty easy to read. So this is only 146 lines of code, so we should be able to get through this pretty easy. Leul, yeah. Have you encountered any of this like overly abstracted Java code? So we've got a function instantiate hello world main class and run. Oh yeah, we've got a hello world interface, and we gotta get an instance. Oh, we get an instance of the factory. We call factory.create hello world. And then, oh, we have an abstraction over the string. So we call hello world.get hello world. And then we get a print strategy. Then we get a status code. Oh, and the print will return a status code, which is like an integer. And then if the status code is not 0, then it'll throw a runtime exception. Yeah, this is like what I'm thinking of when I think of like dependency injection. Oh, sdana says fprintf is named like fprintf from C, where the f is to remind you the first argument is a file pointer. In Go is an io.writer, but is semantically similar. So the first f stands for file, and it's like, even though it's not called a file, we get to choose what virtual file we're printing to, except we're actually writing. Thanks for that explanation. That makes it a lot easier to remember. I know there's also, in addition to fprintf, that's foxtrot, print foxtrot, there's also sprintf, that's Sierra print foxtrot. And that will print out to a string, I guess, or it just prints, or it saves it in memory, which is pretty handy. My first Java program somehow crashed the JVM, although that might have been Cosmic Rays. That's impressive. I don't know if I've ever crashed the JVM. I did a lot of Scala programming for my last job. So here we've got our fprintf. We're making a new printer, calling p.doprintf, and then writing w.write, and then p.buff. So does the printer actually have an in-memory buffer? It looks like it does. So it looks like we actually do the printing logic into an in-memory buffer before writing it to the writer. I think that's a little bit in contrast to what some other programming languages would do. And some other programming languages, I think, would write directly to the writer. And then if you want to buffer it, you have to wrap the writer in a buffered writer. This seems reasonable, though. An io.writer. Okay, so we've got the writer interface. It only has one function, write, and it can take in an array of bytes. Then I think it returns the number of bytes that were written and an error. And the error is if it couldn't write the bytes. I love how insanely simple this is. That is so easy to like deal with as far as I can think of. Source C10 says I wanted to have the code run overnight and came back to a seg of a. I guess that's a seg fault, right? That seems bad. Yikes. Poor JVM. So write the test first. Test-driven development. Let's do it. AKA copy the test. I'm actually doing copy-paste driven development, which is, I would say it's a great type of development. We're going to call this one DI. And then I'm going to make DI test.go, or maybe I'll just pay, yeah, DI test.go. Oh, the Stack Overflow April Fool's joke? Is that the thing where it said, warning, you only have 2 copy pastes left? And it was like referring to you to their paid program for copy pasting from Stack Overflow. I'm not going to lie. I actually didn't realize that was a Stack Overflow April Fool's joke. And I was like, oh man, I only have 2 copy pastes for the month. That's going to be rough. I guess that's actually I don't know. They definitely got me on that one. I normally don't like April Fool's jokes, but assuming the copy paste one was what I thought it was, I found it pretty funny. Oh, it tells you to buy a keyboard with just Control C and V. That's pretty awesome. I know Jordan's stream has a ton of keyboard enthusiasts. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody has like a Control C and V keyboard. So what do we need to import for this? Maybe we actually, I need to import testing. And I think I need to declare a package. I keep calling my package main. Is that bad? Should I be calling it something more informative? So the test should obviously fail. Let's take a look at, undefined bytes. Maybe I need to import bytes. Yep. So now we have undefined greet, which is the error we want. Let's take a look at what the test is doing. We're creating a new buffer, calling greet on our buffer. Then we're stringifying the buffer and verifying that the contents of the buffer is hello Chris. Great. That sounds like a great way to test it. So let's try writing the code for it. First, we start with a package. Then I'm going to write greet as my function. And I need to take in a bytes.buffer. Ooh, here's a question. So I definitely need to take in I need a pointer to a buffer. What we covered before in this is if I took in just a buffer, it would actually make a copy of the data, I believe, and that would not be good. I just wrote Chris here. That's obviously not right. I need to take in the name as a string. And is this going to return anything? It should return an error, actually, because it's possible for the write function to fail. Right now in the test, they don't have it accept the error, so I can just ignore it. So I think I want to call format.fprintf of buffer. And then I put the format string hello, comma, and then I add in the name. This looks, I think, right to me. The issue is this actually returns an error. I'm going to just go ahead and start returning the error. I think I can return it. We could, I mean, in a bigger code base, it would be nice to wrap the error. But it's probably not the biggest deal here. And I need to call this byte.buffer actually. Then I'll need to import bytes. I also need to import format because I'm calling format.printf. And I think that's all I need to import. Does Go have string slices / views? That is a good question. I don't remember hearing about string slices or views, so I guess maybe not. Too many arguments to return. Right. So I probably only want to return the error. I don't want to expose the number of bytes written. I believe the guarantee with this is that unlike in some languages where the writer is allowed to return to only write a portion of the bytes, in this case, you have to return an error if you don't write all of the bytes, which makes it a lot easier to work with. In some languages, you have to call something like write all to make sure that all of your bytes get written. In Golang, it's just like write all of the bytes or return an error, which I think is easy. I'm going to return the error, and this underscore is that I'm ignoring the number of bytes written. And honestly, like, I don't know, like, does writing this standard out ever fail? I guess it does. I guess you can like, you could close the pipe somehow in Unix, right? Like, if you like create the pipe and then kill the program that it's writing to or something. Unexpected comma. Ooh, uh-oh. Line 7. Oh, I think what happened is that I put parentheses around this, but I should not have. Oh, okay. So this looks like it worked great, and we actually passed the test. So, yeah, great. Earlier, okay, so let's make a commit. Mesh Coley says there's slicing available in Go, very similar to Python's. Does Go let you also slice strings? Because I know that we sliced in an earlier episode, we sliced some, I guess it was like, I think we sliced lists. But slicing strings is kind of weird because, especially with Unicode, characters can be different lengths, and you need to make sure that the user doesn't accidentally slice across a character boundary. Oop, forgot to git add my files. So we're going to add that and commit. So let's make a main function here. Can I just add this to my di.go and then run it? I feel like I might be able to. So well, it won't compile because we're not using an interface yet, I think. What do I do? Go run dot. Oops. I need to import OS. Okay. So yeah, we've got this nice error. Cannot use os.stdout, which is a type os.file, as type bytes.buffer, an argument to greet. So Mesh Coley says never considered Unicode characters. Yeah, Unicode is so crazy. Honestly, I think it's really amazing that they've figured out ways to represent every major human written language in digital form, because the needs of the different languages are just they're so crazy and different. There's this guy, I think his Twitter is Manish Earth, and he worked at Firefox, and he has some really, really fun blog posts about Unicode. When you start thinking about programming, like, it's easy to think about ASCII, especially if you're an American like me. But this blog post talks about a few different Unicode things in different languages. So one example is, like, as you can see, when I'm selecting this Korean, I guess it's a grapheme, I can either select the whole thing or I can select none of it. I do not understand enough Korean to get why, but there's just all these crazy differences. I'm going to post this to the chat for anybody who's interested in checking out some crazy Unicode stuff. I love this this blogger. Yeah, normally when a lot of the time I can just assume that the text is valid Unicode. But if it's not, yeah, yeesh. Yeah, mustache edition this week. I'm breaking out the spring facial hair now that the weather is nice. Although it's only like 40 degrees today, but So okay, we need to make an interface here, right? How are we going to do that? Ooh. I think I can figure out how to do that. So I'm going to assume di.go. Right now, this is taking a bytes.buffer, and I want it to take an io.writer. I'm not totally sure if I need to take a pointer to the writer or not. I'm going to start with not taking a pointer and seeing if that does the right thing. And so I'm going to also need to change my imports here. I need to take IO instead of bytes. So that's actually kind of cool. Our production code no longer has this dependency on bytes. Only the testing code is going to have that dependency. Is this going to work? I think it might. Let's take a look at ditest.go to see if it works. Ooh. Well, except for the pointer thing, which I suspect I did wrong. I think it might work. So I'm going to try the test. Okay. It did work, actually. And let's try to do go run dot. Hello, LED. Oh, awesome. So adding an interface did work there. Right. So I think this worked. Ooh. Are we going to write this over an HTTP response? That is awesome. I definitely want to do that. So this is a little bit more complicated with HTTP because, like, instead of just having pipes that we read from and write to, we're now looking at actual HTTP request and responses, which is a different model than just like being able to write data out to a binary pipe. So, but yeah, it looks like we can actually still use the greeter function. So here we take an HTTP response writer, which I'm guessing is like the actual data for the response. And then log that. Okay. So we're going to serve on port 5000 and pass in the greeter handler. That's fun. This is a very simple HTTP server. So we'll need to delete our previous main function. That's fine. And we'll need some new imports. We're going to need to import HTTP. When people say that Go is a batteries included language, it seems like there's a pretty good amount of batteries included. Like, for example, it has an HTTP server, which is, I think, not a simple thing in general. I think we're good to, oh, I'm going to need to import log, it looks like. Looking forward to learning about logging as well. Yeah, logging is another kind of batteries included type of situation. So go run dot, oops, cannot find package HTTP. Uh-oh. Okay, it's called net/HTTP. And we no longer need to import OS because we're not doing the standard out thing anymore. So let's do go run dot, and it should be running a server. Ooh, port 5000 already in use. Okay. I wonder what I'm running on port 5000. How about 5001? So it looks like it's not logging anything. And I'm going to try just hitting this with curl. Wow, that's so easy. Uvara J. Senna, 26. Hello, welcome. We're, I guess we're making an HTTP server in Go. Apparently, it's just as simple as doing an import and running these two lines of code. That is like, honestly, it's pretty crazy how easy that is. I really like that. Is there another language where it's easier to write an HTTP server? I almost think that must be one of the simplest things I've seen. PHP. Oh yeah, okay. I haven't done. I think I like started programming PHP in like a really long time ago, but I never got good at it. So I think the point is that they're letting us reuse our greet function because http.responseWriter is an io.writer. So I think that's really cool. All right, so dependency injection. I mean, I don't know if I would call what we did today dependency injection. I think you could. I think it's a good pattern that they're using. Essentially what they're saying is use an interface and then you can, for example, in a production context, you can pass in a production version of a writer, which is this HTTP response writer. And then for testing, you can pass in a test version of a writer, which is a buffer. But I'm not really sure. I don't know. I think it's a matter of taste whether you call that dependency injection, but I think it's a really good pattern. So I'm going to make a commit. This is like HTTP. It's going to run my tests. And what I want to go do here is what happens, what do people think is going to happen if I remove this ampersand? Is it going to fail to compile? Is it going to write? Is it going to copy the buffer and then write into the buffer and then the test will fail? Or maybe, is it going to still work? I don't think it's going to work. My guess is that it's going to compile, but that it won't actually write into the buffer. It'll like write into a copy of the buffer. Let's see. I think being able to predict something like this, even though in this case it's kind of just like a fun puzzle is probably helpful in understanding how Go is working under the hood. So I predict it's going to compile but fail to run or fail to pass the test. Oops. I did do Go run. I wanted to go do Go test. Okay, so my prediction was not correct. It says cannot use buffer as type io.writer in argument to greet. Bytes.buffer does not implement io.writer. And it says write method has pointer receiver. So I think that's actually a better way of failing because the compiler kept us from making that mistake at compile time instead of letting something weird happen at runtime. So I like that a lot. I'm going to do a git reset. So yeah, let's wrap up. We refactored the hello world code so that we can control where the data was written by injecting a dependency. That's a great summary. And we can test the code. That's important. And I used that this week when I was doing a little bit of test automation stuff. We're separating our concern. This one I really like because it means that the test code does not have a dependency on HTTP, and the production code doesn't have a dependency on bytes.buffer, which I think is clean. Source E10 says, it's bad if you mess up the receiver, though. I think Large Databank found an error like this in Cockroach on stream recently, where the method received a copy instead of a pointer. Oh, where you accidentally write the type definition wrong. Oh, that sounds really tough. Yeah, I see that. And we can reuse our code more because now that we're using an interface, we can, for example, use our code in an HTTP server or writing to standard out. What about mocking? I hear you need that for DI, and also it's evil. Mocking will be covered in detail later, and it's not evil. I don't know. Do people use a lot of mocking? I would say mocking can be evil. I don't think it is evil or it is not evil, but when you're mocking global things, I think that can be kind of evil because if you mock something global in a test, it means that you can no longer run that test in parallel with other tests that might depend on the same thing. That said, mocking can still be really useful. But in this case, we did not really need to mock because we had access to this print, or we had access to fprintf, foxtrot print foxtrot, rather than printf, which means that we didn't need to like mock os.standard out. So I think it was better to do this without mocking since we could. The Go standard library is really good. Take time to study it. That sounds great. I'm kind of used to languages like Java and Python, where sometimes you get into the standard library and things just look absolutely crazy. I think that's more true for Python because a lot of stuff ends up being written in C rather than Python. In Java, some of the standard library stuff is pretty readable. Like maybe like like a map or something could be pretty readable. It's like kind of vanilla Java, but once you get down into some of the Java standard library stuff, it requires either like performance or different kinds of permissions that make the Java standard library really hard to use. Whereas I think like Golang and definitely also Rust have really readable standard libraries where the code in the standard library actually looks really similar to the code that you would write as a programmer. And I hope that more languages will continue to do that in the future. Source E10 sends a link to raw Waker vtable. I know that that's a crazy futures / async programming thing. Yeah, those Wakers in Rust are crazy. I think async programming is really hard to get right. And especially in Rust, it's a little weird because they're trying a really interesting new approach that hasn't been done in too many other languages, but they're also hitting some definite usability roadblocks. So on Fridays, I stream Golang for Cockroach, but on Saturdays, including tomorrow morning, I've been doing Rust streaming. And so if you want to tune in and chat about Rust, I'm working on a city sim game that runs in the browser using WebAssembly. So that I think I'm actually getting to a point where the game is almost working, which I'm pretty excited about. So definitely looking to kind of explore the boundaries of what I can get done with WebAssembly. So yeah, what are we going to be doing next week? By the way, I'm hoping to, I said this last week as well, I'm hoping to do some longer streams. But last week I had to stop at 1 p.m. and this week I also have to stop at 1 p.m. unfortunately. But I'm hoping to stream for a little longer in the future. Next week we're going to be learning about mocking. That's great. I'm definitely mocking, I think, is something that can be really, as I mentioned, it can be pretty tricky to get right. And I haven't yet seen a mocking approach that I felt like I was super in love with. So I really want to see whether Golang's approach to mocking produces code that I'm excited about using. As I mentioned, I do need to sign off now, but thanks so much for everybody who tuned in and everybody who participated in the chat. I'm really enjoying learning Golang together, and hopefully you enjoyed learning about dependency injection today. And yeah, looking forward to see you next Friday to learn about mocking.